unit, Hitman 2-3, this is Hitman 2-2, over.
Hitman 2-2, you're coming in weak and unreadable. Try cleaning your handset. Try again.
Hitman 2-3, this is Hitman 2-2, how you read me now?
2-3 has you loud and clear. Out.
Hitman 2-3, this is Hitman 2-2, over.
Roger, I got your
ready to pop smoke. Please fill me in on your situation. Alright. Calm down, buddy. We're gonna be down here. We're not gonna shoot. Calm down, pop this smoke. Don't hold it. The second foot's coming down. And if nobody can do it, these guys can do it. So just relax. Be cool. Come on down. Keep coming down.
Okay, George, so let's start with your name, your age and where you're from.
Okay, my name's George Mayne. I'm a very young 72. I might look 95, but I'm really young 72. I'm from a place called Galston in New South Wales. I actually came from Brisbane. I was born up there in 1950 as a wee boy. And joined the army at the ripe age of 17 and a half.
So what made you enlist in the army?
Well, a long story, but Dad would have his mates come over and we were told to leave the room and we'd go into the lounge or something and the men would talk about their time during the war. And we would listen, you know, even though we weren't supposed to. And so I always wanted to kind of join the army. But I was a bit of a rebel at school, so I left school at the age 14. And to leave school you had to have an apprenticeship or something that wouldn't let you leave unless you had something to go to. Vietnam was on and I always wanted to kind of join the army, and I thought if I can join the army I can go to Vietnam and get a war service home loan, you know, that'll be lovely. So I went home and saw Mum and I said I'd like to join the army, and she said fine, you know, following your dad's footsteps, and his dad had all been in the military, and so I ended up joining the army, and next thing you know I was in Armoured Corps and off to Vietnam, yeah.
So you did sign up, and how do you think Sue Ellen felt about you doing that?
Well, I guess she's a bit upset at the time, but I actually went, I don't know if I told the story, I actually went to join the Navy. So there's this recruiting centre in Brisbane, it's got 3 floors, right? So I went to the top floor to join the Navy. I could see myself cracking through the waves on this big ship, you see. So the door was closed, they were out for lunch. So I went to the next level, which was the Air Force, and the door was closed, they were out for lunch. This is a true story. So I went downstairs to the army, and I said, well, I may as well join the army, because that's really what I wanted to do. So I went in there, and the door was open, they weren't having lunch. So I went in there and I said, I want to join up, and said, mate, you're just the young lad we need. Go home, get your mum to sign the papers, here's the papers, because you're under 18. Went home, got the papers signed, went back, told my darling fiancée that I was going to go away.
And what were your first impressions of army life?
I loved it. Yeah, great.
What did you love about it?
All the people swearing at me and all the stuff. I was so naive, you know, to me a bottle of beer was getting drunk, you know, at 13 or 14, which you shouldn't be doing, but you know. And to get down there and all of a sudden you've got, you know, 3 meals a day, you've got all these men running around and people yelling and screaming at you and calling you all kinds of terrible things, you know, and a bit of bastardisation. I thought, this is great, I'd never heard of this stuff before. And other guys are getting very upset and crying about it, you know, getting your bed thrown out the window and all this kind of stuff. They were doing terrible things to you, all part of the re-education. So when you get in there, they shave all your hair off, take all your clothes off you and give you just old army stuff to wear initially, and they reprogram you, which is, I suppose they do it in all military services. So they reprogram you after all this time so that you actually react to orders, and rather than start thinking about what you should be not doing. So they run you all the time, push you, and I thought this is great because I've been challenged and I rather enjoyed it. I didn't find it offensive at all. I love people yelling at me and saying I'm going to pull your arms out and hit you with the wet ends and all this kind of stuff, you know, or shove this in your ear and ride you like a motorbike. I thought, wow, I said, this is good. I never heard that before. Really crazy, yeah.
You joined the Armoured Corps and you were trained to be a driver?
out of the 5 or 6 platoons we had at Kapuka that were marching out of Kapuka, graduating, of all that, a couple of hundred men, only 3 of us were allocated to Armoured Corps. In those days, I'm pretty sure it's just like throwing darts in the wall to work out who's going where. Things are different now, but in those days, it was a numbers game. Vietnam was on, so they wanted, out of all those men, they only wanted 3 of us to go to Armoured Corps. 3 of us in the 1 platoon got Armoured Corps. 2 of us out of the 1 room got Armoured Corps. So 3 of us headed off to Armoured Corps. We get down there and they have another selection process as well. So then they sit in another room and they do psych tests and different things. And one thing in particular was the psych test, like a mechanical test. If you pull this lever, how does this wheel go and that wheel react to that? And if you did this, how would that wheel go? I couldn't understand any of it. So I just ticked and flicked everywhere, you see. Then they did an education side of it. And then after all of that, they get the assessment out and they said, well, okay, young Trooper Main, you've got a very high academic ability, extremely low mechanical, we're going to make you a tank driver. And I said, but I've got to fix things. And they said, oh, you'll learn. What did you really want to do when you joined the army? He said, I really wanted to become an engineer and drive bulldozers. I thought that'd be good at 17, you know. And we're driving tanks, man, it'll be just the same. You'll be really good at this. So anyhow, I went away to do my tank driver's course. And I wasn't a very good tank driver either, because I used to smash into walls, take out fences and do all kinds of things I shouldn't do. But I rather enjoyed it. It was good fun, you know, and I graduated as a qualified tank driver, and then I was posted to what they call Armoured Regiment, 1st Armoured Regiment, where I spent more time driving tanks, getting tanks broken and bogged and falling over, but I managed to get through all the training. And then I was sent to Vietnam to be a tank driver in Vietnam, where it kind of got a bit more serious over there, yeah.
So when you were given those orders that you were being deployed to Vietnam, how did that feel?
Well, to me, it was exciting because I was always planning ahead, always wanting to do things. So to me, I wasn't kind of frightened to go to Vietnam. When you're young, you're 19, you're a warrior. That's what warriors are, and you know, in all types of tribes and things. Young men carry spears, old men make decisions, and let all the young men run around and kill everybody. So I wasn't afraid to go. I was perhaps a little bit apprehensive, but you've been trained and trained and trained, and you know you're going over there, so you go there. And my idea was to get this war service home loan. That's what I really wanted to get. So I had to do my 12 months over in Vietnam to do that. So when I got there, it was kind of a surprise. I think Pedro and the others might have spoken about all our training was not suited for going to Vietnam. We spent 5 or 6 weeks in the snow training. You know, why would you go to the snow when you go to Vietnam? You go to Canungra, and it was in winter time at Canungra. Now it was a jungle warfare centre, but it was freezing cold again. You land over there and your first impression when the door opens is the heat that gets you. It's just like going to Singapore. When you open the door up in Singapore, you feel the heat and you feel the humidity. So yeah, it was exciting, you know, a young bloke at 19.
Did you feel overwhelmed?
No.
No?
No, it's had a job to do. It's exciting.
Okay, so you end up in, you're transported to Nui Dat?
Yep. So you land in Saigon, and then you take off from Saigon in a Hercules, and you land in Nui Dat. You get on an army jeep or something, and they take you up to 1 Armoured Regiment, or to the squadron. They only have squadron sizes over there, so I went to B Squadron, is what they call a reinforcement. You spend the first 2 weeks in A Squad, first 2 weeks in reinforcement, or Rio section, I can't remember what it's called, but you spend 2 weeks acclimatising to the heat and getting briefings and letting them know what's happened here, checking your inoculations, making sure you're aware of what's happening. And you're told that, you know, when you go out into the villages, anyone wearing black pyjamas is a baddie. So the first time you go out in a village, everyone's wearing black pyjamas, so you can't quite work out who's a baddie and who's not a baddie. But you get briefings on hand grenades and bombs and all kinds of stuff, and then eventually, when a vacancy comes up in the tank troop, they said, okay, you're going to 1 troop, we need a new driver. So you go over there and you become a driver for 1 Charlie. It was my first tank I drove there.
And that was where you met Mick and Gary for the first time?
No. They didn't come in till later. I got over there earlier. Mick would have got there at the same time as me, but I managed to chop his top of his finger off when we were in Australia training. So we had to wait another couple of months to heal his finger that I managed to break. So we trained a lot together in Australia before we went over there, Mick and I, as part of the tank group. And when our group went over to Vietnam, Mick couldn't join us. So I was over there ahead of that. Gary was a national service when he came in a little bit later in the year. I think something like, I was in there in December. I think Gary got over there in May or June or something of 1970. So we hadn't met. So when I first got over there, I went to a tank called 1 Charlie. So it's 4 tanks in the troop. Tank Troop 1, Alpha, Bravo and Charlie. So I drove the lead tank for the very first time, yeah.
So can you tell me about your first operation?
Yep, first operation we went out to, I can't exactly remember where we went, but it's probably about an hour out of our camp at Nui Dat. We went to a particular area, a village, and we turned off on a dirt road, and the very first dirt road we went for probably about 200 metres and we hit a mine. So all of a sudden everything went bang and everybody started shooting. I thought, shit, here we are, we're really at it now. But everything just clicks in and you just do what you have to do. I wasn't really scared. I was probably a little shocked that this had all happened and this is the reality of it all. There's dirt going everywhere, and one of the immediate reactions is the turrets all turn around because you don't know whether it's a command detonator, that means someone sat in a bush and pushed a trigger to blow the mine up, or whether you drove over it and set it off yourself. So the first immediate reaction is you just start shooting everything. So all the turrets go in different directions and you just open up a machine gun fire and just blast all around the place. That's the first thing you do. Then that might only be for a few seconds, but it seems like an eternity. So then you just kind of let the dust settle and then you go on with your business. Everyone was okay, no one was really hurt, so we just move on from there, yeah.
So you took part in quite a few operations during your tour of duty.
Yep.
Are there any that really stick in your mind?
Probably a couple, but in particular is one in a mountain range they call the Long Highs. It's like the Great Dividing Range idea, Long Highs. And we were supposedly had infantry with us and the tanks, and we were chasing some Viet Cong who had a mortar tube and a mortar base plate, and they were trying to kill us by putting mortars in, bombing us. So we were driving along and we're in a contact with other enemy as well. And I can remember a helicopter flying right above the tank and he's firing his miniguns. All the hot shells are falling on my head and down the back of my shirt. We're all shooting bullets and carrying on. And these 2 Viet Cong come running between the 2 tanks carrying the mortar tube. And there's like hundreds of us trying to kill all these people. And these 2 little buggers just ran straight through the middle of us. And we couldn't do anything because we'd hurt our own men. And they shot through the bush. Now we were there for quite some time in that particular contact. I don't think we got many people, I don't think. I think we're probably fell over ourselves more than anything else, but yeah. Another operation I went on was called Operation Matilda, and that was the largest armoured corps operation since World War II. There's 44 armoured vehicles, and we travelled around all these provinces and seek and destroy. And I think the only thing we found was a couple of vegetable gardens. You go to most of the villages, you don't see young men or men really. You only see children or wives because the men are out doing naughty things. We had one particular area where we stopped. There was a man who Chu-hoid who surrendered, a Viet Cong, wanted to surrender, and they got him in and they interrogated him. And I said, well, why? And he said, well, I'm waiting for the Australians. And they said, well, why would you wait for the Australians? He said, if I'd Chu-hoid to the Americans, they'd shoot me. The Kiwis would eat me. He said, and the Australians would take care of me. So I waited till you guys turned up before I surrendered.
George, a lot of people wouldn't associate tanks with Vietnam. So could you give me some understanding of what it was like being in a tank crew and what it was like being a driver in a tank?
Yep, of course. Because the Australian Army didn't think tanks would go well in the jungle, because it's the first time they've been used in jungle. They're normally in what they call open warfare, you know, like Desert Storm and things like that. And they didn't think tanks would be very successful. They didn't do a lot of tank infantry training, so we had to work with infantry and cavalry. We did training in Australia with tanks and cavalry together, learning how to work together and support each other, but very little with the infantry. So when you get over there, I think a lot of the commanders didn't, infantry commanders and others didn't really understand how to use tanks, right? So the whole world revolves around infantry, unfortunately. So this is why we're doing things like we are now, to give an insight into how the tanks were used over there. So we would go out on operations either by ourselves, 4 tanks together, and the recovery vehicle, like the motor mechanics that would come with us. So we had a habit of breaking down, especially given these vehicles are quite old. And or you'd have what they call another recovery vehicle, which is like a Centurion tank with the top cut off, and it had winches and toolboxes and things on it to help you out. So you'd go out on an operation yourself. So as a 19-year-old tank driver, I really didn't understand all the things that were happening above me, if you know what I mean. It was my job to sit in the tank, drive to point A and point B, get it there as safe as possible, make sure that the tank was as level as possible when we were firing, even though the gun had what they call gyros, it could bounce up and down. But if Mick's sitting behind when he's trying to shoot and do things, I had to try and keep the gun platform as smooth as possible. When I was driving, I had to try and keep it as smooth as possible so the boys inside the turret didn't get bashed around, because Mick would sit, the gunner would sit in this little tiny part of the tank, little cubicle, and lucky Mick was small, but he was coming out with lots of bruises on his head, because I was always hitting bumps and doing things and driving into trees. I wasn't a very good driver, by the way. Matter of fact, I was voted the worst tank driver in the squadron. So then you had Gary, for example, who'd be the operator on this side. He would be sitting on top of the tank where the hatch is open, so he'd be more comfortable to absorb any shocks. The crew commander had his own little seat here, so the crew commander would be here, Mick would be at his feet, Gary would be to my left, roughly where the light is, the big gun would be through the middle, and I'll be down the bottom of that again, so like the 3 of us in a tier. So generally, the 4 of us would go out, the 4 tanks in a tank troop, depends on what orders were given to those above me, like my troop leader and stuff. I was just told to drive, you know, so you drive. And try and keep the tank more comfortable for the boys inside, and away we go. Driving the tank, it's a 52-tonne hunk of metal. It's got a V12 Meteor engine in the back with 2 4-barrel carburetors, 24 plugs, top speed of no more than 25 miles per hour. A set of drum brakes that don't stop you after 5 miles an hour, because they just don't do that. And within the driver's compartment, nothing was automatic, everything was manual. I had a clutch to push in, and these are just metal squares that come down, or 2 arms and a pedal, no rubber or anything, just all metal. So a clutch, a brake, an accelerator, a gear stick between my legs, and then 2 handles to pull up and down here, and 5 forward gears and 2 reverse gears, 1 high reverse and 1 low reverse. It takes 4 or 5 gallons to start the thing up, and you get 4 gallons per mile. You don't get 4 miles per gallon, you get 4 gallons per mile. So they bolted a 100-gallon fuel tank on the back to give you more range. So we wouldn't be driving real long distances to go anywhere anyhow, but we would be out perhaps 2 or 3 days, and if we were driving too much, we would stop and get a resupply and get more petrol and food in. That would be a regular thing every couple of days. Sometimes we'd be out for 2 or 3 weeks, sometimes we'd be up there for 10 weeks, sometimes depends on what we had to do. So we would go out and drive. I would spend, on an average, depends on where we were, probably 8 to 10 hours a day driving. I'd just be following the guys in front, you know, mind and neutral, just keep driving. If we're driving through jungles or things like that, it would be a slow process. You work all the time to drive the tank, to keep it going. You've got to keep clutching up and down, changing gears, double clutching, you're continually driving all the time. If you're in open paddocks, like when we go and see Matt and Ralph and have a look at their areas, the beautiful rolling hills, that was always good tank country, because you could get a bit of speed up and enjoy the drive. If you're out on an open road, you could actually get up to about 20 miles per hour. It doesn't sound very fast, but when you're pumping 52 tonnes of metal and you can't stop, it runs along. And there's quite often, though, I would have a few incidents on the way where I would take the corner on the highways, well, they're not big highways, but roads, a bitumen road. One particular time, I was driving along, I was going too fast. So instead of changing down gears, going say from fourth down to second or something, because the steering all works on the tracks and it all works on speed. So when you pull the right hand lever, the right hand track slows down, the left hand track drives you around. So I'm driving down the road, I come to a T intersection, I didn't slow down, I didn't change gears, I took the corner wide and I started to slide. And as I slid, I went into a sewage farm, right? So this open pit of poo and everything else.
You would have gone out on many operations during your 12 months of tour. Can you give me a sense of what your day-to-day life was like?
Okay, we would go out, start off, load up all your bullets and all that kind of stuff, and all your rations, refuel, drive off. As I said, most of the day, depending on where we're going, I'd do most of the work by driving while the guys just sat on their ass doing next to nothing, waiting for something to happen. Of course, that was their role. So after a day's driving, we would stop for the night and we would stop what they call a night harbour. So if we're at just 4 tanks by ourselves, we have a star formation, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we'd all bog into each other, depending on the area. If it was a bit deadly, it might have been mined, we'd all park together and just traverse the guns around and you'd sleep in the tracks so that you know that it was safe. Other situations, you might have infantry with you and you'd stay in the night harbour together, or sometimes you go to what they call a fire support base. That'd be like a little base put around the place, all around our province where we were working. That could be anything from barbed wire and gun pits and things where you'd go and visit and stay and be tanks for a couple of days. They'd have artillery and infantry people there. Some of them were semi-permanent, some of them were permanent fire support bases. So you might be going to fire support bases. So when you'd generally, if you're going in the bush by yourselves, you'd stop for the night. It was my job to service the tank, cook the dinner, put the beds out, the stretchers, fluff the boys' pillows for them so they had the nice little fluffy pillows to lay on, while the crew commander would go and have his operation brief. Gary and Mick would just have a cigarette or something and wait for me to cook dinner, because I was pretty good at cooking dinner. They didn't do much else. They probably cleaned their gun and did the machine guns and everything else, and Gary would be doing orders and stuff, you know. But I was doing all the physical stuff because that was just my domain, was at the bottom of the tank, you know, and their domain was at the top of the tank. Gary would be working radios, getting resupplies organised, Mick would be chewing up his machine guns, getting the bullets organised, and I'll be fluffing their pillows, getting them ready to go. So that was kind of the day's drive. We would have lucky enough sometimes to have a shower of a night time because I'd be covered in dirt because I'd drive and continue getting dust and dirt all over me, and bugs and spiders and snakes and all kinds of things falling out of trees on top of me. And so at the back of the tank, we'd have our jerry cans laid down because we have big radiators and we might need to refill the radiators if we had a problem. But that would form warm water for night time. So we could hang a canvas shower basket and a little rose on a tank barrel or a crowbar, and 4 of us would shower out of 1 jerry can of water. First guy in got the best shower, the last guy in got next to nothing. He'd have soap in his hair when he came back out again. Yeah.
So while you were out on operations like that, were you able to make any connections with home?
Nothing. Okay, in those days, of course, we didn't have satellite phones and all this kind of stuff. We didn't have mobile phones, going back to the 69, 70s. So the only way you could contact home was to write a letter home, or a cassette. You had little cassette recorders. You could put a cassette in there and talk and then leave a message and send that home in an envelope. But most of the time we would just write letters when we could and send them home, yeah. I guess the best night was your first night back after operations, because when you're out in the bush, we used to get a rum ration. I don't think any other corps got it, but Armoured Corps got a rum ration. So for every 100 meals, we would get an American supply pack. All our rations were American rations. I won't mention the Australian government paid for them, but we got rations. And after every 100 meals, we would get this supply pack. It had chewing tobacco and razor blades and cigarettes. We got plenty of cigarettes, right? But we would save up our rum. And we were entitled to 2 cans of beer per man per day. But we didn't have it in the field. They'd save it for us at the boozer. So our first night back, the cook would put on fresh food for us because we're living on ration packs. So he would have a barbecue organised for us. He'd come over to our tent. So basically you had all the outside wire, which is a perimeter, then you had the tank, our little tent, and then more wire inside. So the cook would come over through the wire, put out the food, over would come all your beer cold, and you'd open up all your bottles of rum, and you'd have a great night the first night back. Next morning you had to be shaved, cleaned up, and off you go. So those nights were good. You sit around and talk and have heaps of fun and laugh and giggle about all the things that happen. Other high times, some funny times. I guess sometimes we stop at a village and you'd go and see the local village elder and say, look, we've got some petrol here, can we borrow some of your motorbikes? A little step through Hondas, you know, we want to go for a ride, you know, just something to do. And he'd say, oh yeah, you put petrol in, you have bikes. So I had Mick on the back on this particular, just recall this, on the back of this little Honda step through, never been on a motorbike before in my life, started up, put it in the gear, revved it, and the thing shot out from underneath me. I fell back on it, Mick went straight over the back. And eventually I picked him up and we rode around the village doing things, you know, just stupid things. Another good time was when we stopped and we decided that we needed a mascot. Now, at that time, there was some mascots around Nui Dat. Some of the units were getting animals to have mascots. Our troop leader decided we needed a goat. We'd stop at this village and there's the most gorgeous little kids running around, not as in children, but as in kid goats. A little black and white one. So the boss said, I think we need to have a goat. So we went and bought this goat. And eventually we took him back to the unit and we went and saw the boss and said, look, we have a goat, can we register him as our mascot? Yeah, all good. So he became Bill Goat number 1, Trooper Bill Goat, sorry. And Bill grew and grew and grew until he became a pain in the ass, because besides our tank and our tent, we used to have a bunker, and where in case we were attacked and we couldn't use the tank, we'd jump into this hole in the ground and had a tin roof on it. Bill used to love to hear his hoofs on the roofs, so he'd tap dance all the time until we chased him out. Bill Goat one night decided to go down to the operations room and shit all over the floor and eat the maps. So he was eating his maps, and next morning he got in no end of trouble because he was found asleep on one of the couches in the soldiers' canteen. And of course you could trace the goat poo all the way back to the operations room, and half the maps are all eaten. So he was officially charged. So we had to put our uniforms on and march the goat in, and he got charged in front of the OC. Trooper Bill Goat, you know, you're going to get 7 days confined to barracks because you've eaten all the maps. And he was awarded 7 days field punishment. It was a rope around his neck with an empty 30 cal canister round, or shell box round full of sand, so he couldn't get away too far, right? But we happened to have a pet monkey as well, and a little brown rhesus monkey, I think he was our pet. And him and the goat got on very well together, you see. So what would happen is that the monkey would undo the rope, and the two of them would go running around the camp misbehaving until we could catch the goat and put the rope back on him again till he goes his field punishment. So the monkey also, in those days, we never had rip-top cans. So we used to have a box with a lever on it with 2 prongs, and you push that down and pop the top of your can for your canned beer. So we taught the monkey how to sit on that box and pop the cans. So he's doing that, but his payment was a can of beer every so often. So the monkey used to get drunk. So the monkey climbed on the fan, and we turned the fan on. He used to love going around on the fan when he was drunk. until eventually he'd fall off because he had too much to drink. So the monkey and the goat used to be great mates. And that was some of the funny times, yeah.
Okay. So George, we don't have much time left, but I really do want to ask you about how you felt just as your tour of duty came to an end.
Yep.
And can we
Yeah, of course. Just about a fortnight before you're due to go home, they tend to bring you back from the field, so in case things called getting too short.
Yeah.
So you'd come back.
And the others have told us about the happy pills.
Happy pills.
I'd just like to know really about how you felt yourself about coming to the end.
Okay, well, when you come with the happy pills, you know you're getting short. You've got 14 days to come back. I'm sure the happy pills are mind-bending things, but it doesn't matter. So you're happy that you're going home. You're getting anticipating. Your wife's waiting for you to come home. Your mates are saying goodbye to you. Your mates in Australia have written to you to say, look, we'll meet you at the airport, we'll do this and that. So the anticipation's building up just before you're about to go home. You go and get new uniforms and things from the Q store so you can take them all home as well. So then the day comes when you're about to leave, so you have a big party the night before, and then you jump on the aeroplane and you fly into Saigon, and then you fly out, excuse me, back to Australia from there. So my first night back, I couldn't get a joining flight to go back to Brisbane to see my wife and my family. So yeah, I was dead keen, very excited about coming home after all that time. I didn't know what to expect, you know. My son was growing up, my wife was getting a little bit older, mum and dad were waiting for me at the airport, and then the first couple of days home is very awkward to get used to, given it's only been probably a day or two since you've been doing what you were doing. And we're given a sheet of A4 paper to give to your wife or your parents to say, if George grabs a shovel and goes down the yard to have a poo, don't get upset. If he does this or does that. And there was no help, there was no counselling, there was no reorientation to get back into Civvy Street. You just got off the plane, you went home.
And how did you find that period of transition?
Very hard.
What was the hardest thing?
I think the hardest thing was just readjusting back to having a family and being able to talk properly without swearing and carrying on. Having left the war zone to be able to spend time at home and be another person again, and go to the shop and buy a milkshake or have a steak or go out with your family, or readjust to having your wife with you again after 12 months away and having a child, and then readjusting to civilian life around being a normal person again. Yeah, it wasn't all that easy. I think what helped a lot with a lot of guys is that I stayed in the army for a long time, and I guess working with other men that have been to Vietnam, you kind of help yourself. Some of the national servicemen would have got out of the army straight away and would have had a lot of difficulty assimilating again back into Civvy Street, whereas I stayed army, and you're on an army base and you're with army people all the time. I don't know how hard it was on my wife and my family, but you tend to adjust to what you're doing, but you're still in the army and still doing army things.
So what do you think could have been done better in terms of looking after veterans when they finished their tour of duty?
Well, I guess the biggest thing would be assimilation back into Civvy Street. Mental health would have been a big thing in those days because they didn't pay much attention to mental health, and PTSD was only something new. Even going back to World War I and II, they used to call it, nerve gas problems or, shell shock and all this kind of stuff. So really, there was no real physical help or medical help for you when you came back. You weren't offered counselling. Not that I was aware of anyhow, as a young man, but you weren't offered counselling. You went back to a military unit, you did your thing again, you wanted to be fit all the time. There didn't appear to be many support services. I was at one stage there, prior to Vietnam, I didn't know I could get a removal. So I packed up my wife and Jared and as a baby and moved myself to Queensland and to set Sue up and get her organised with our family. Came back to Puckapunyal and my SSM called me in and said, where have you been? I knew you were on holidays, but you've left your married quarter. I said, yeah, cleaned it all. He said, no, there's nothing wrong with it, but you weren't told to a removal. I said, well, no one told me about it. Now that could be my own ignorance, but I want to take care of the family and do things. Now, when you're coming back, there was, I said, just one sheet of paper. There was no other counselling. You didn't go to the doctor and say, I've got a problem. You just didn't say that. Yeah.
Do you think things have improved since your time?
I think things are better now, but I happen to run mental health first aid courses through my Veterans Wellbeing Centre and our Hornsby sub-branch that I run at the moment. And when I'm dealing with current serving veterans, they say to me, we cannot go and complain or raise the issue of mental health because you won't get promoted, we won't be deployed, and we'll be shoved out the window. We don't want you because you've got issues, we can't rely on you. And even though these men and women are calling out for help. So with Lifeline at Gordon, again, we've developed a veterans program that's helping current serving veterans to bypass the medical system to come in to get assistance because they don't want to tell their bosses they have a mental health problem or they have some issues.
So how has your wellbeing centre materially helped someone?
Okay. Yeah, so what I find is that I get young, well I call young, but men and women in their 30s and 40s who contact me through my website. And I say, well, I've got issues with this and that, and we advertise that we can help you with different situations, physical, mental health, all kinds of things. So what I normally do is get them on board, speak to them all initially for an interview, then take them to the National Centre for Veterans Health at Concord, arrange appointments for them all, and then they have a 3-month program over there where they help them through all their medications and medical appointments and things. So our Veterans Wellbeing Centre is not like some others like Soldier On that who try and provide the help there by employing doctors and psychologists and everything else. We use our centre as a hub, and we use things like Lifeline, we use things like DVA, have a thing called Open Arms where they can get assistance as well. There's legal aid for veterans as well. So I just kind of point people in the right direction, hold them by the hand, get them to where they've got to go, and then let the professionals take care of them. Then we follow up with phone calls. How you going, John? How's things going? Not going too bad at all. And I just keep a monitor on top of that. So it's the professionals who are taking care of them, people like RSL Life Care and that, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Don't need someone to save me, no, and don't come running to blame me. From miles away I can tell that something's off. The way you look and how you pause when you talk, I think you said enough. You said your love for me something brand new. You said this is something